Hello, dear students. I welcome you all to NextAchievers IAS online platform. So, as you all know, most of you know that we recently started coming online. We shifted to online mode now, and we have started one concept video series wherein we are coming up with the concept videos for various topics. And on the similar line, we have also started the online newspaper discussion, जहाँ पे कि we'll be discussing all the important news, editorials, and idea page, of Indian Express and editorial pages and other important articles from the Hindu. In the exam-oriented manner, all the discussion will, revolve around UPSC exam preparation. So we'll be discussing the important articles, important news, pages, and important other editorial articles, socio-economic, economic, and even other general paper, related. All the articles will be discussing into it. So that would be a kind of. It will not be a detailed analysis because for detailed analysis we have like a separate PDF section and all. So herein it would be a crisp, a short one and crisp one, which gives you an idea, a little bit of background, and how you'll be able to use that, answer writing and everywhere, and make yourself aware with the current affairs, topics. That's how it would be aimed. So let's begin. If we see, this is the Hindu, today's newspaper, 3rd June 2021. So the very first news on editorial page, which we see the article, adverse changes, federalism imperiled. See, this article is actually talks about federalism, uh, and the current situation of the center and state relationship, and at the same time it also brings the federal structure of India, and how there is some overlapping situations, and this also in the current situation that that relationship is being somehow imperiled, somehow compromised with various actions taken by the strong central government. That's how this article has been discussed. So let me tell you that in the outset, at the outset, that this article has little bit of political connotation, a strong criticism, the the current dispensation. So we need not to go into the the strong criticism. What is our aim here in this article is that we just have to focus on uh, the federal structure of given an Indian constitution. In that context, we have to analyze the situations which has been discussed in this article. So we need not to take everything on the face value, as we all know that these articles are sometimes analyzed on the on different with different tilt, with different biases. So we should not be extreme in our criticism or even our praise and all. So in this article, that's what we see. There is a little bit of tilt towards the strong criticism. So we're not going to take that into consideration. Our focus will be to relate this article with the federal structure of in the Indian context and in the Indian constitution's context, how it is given in our Indian constitution. Or this should be even your perspective, and this should be even your inclination when you reading this article. So you should not go deeper into all kinds of criticism. So here actually the author has been mentioning how the central government, when it comes to COVID-19 vaccination drive, recently the Niti Aayog member has mentioned that due to less centralization, as lack of centralization in India, the COVID-19 vaccination drive, the management of COVID-19 vaccination drive has been affected. So through this statement, actually, what they wanted to say here in this article, actually, the writer keeps pointing out all kinds of slogans. This sits well with the growing incursion of union government into the sectors where the state government has primary responsibilities. Like he's mentioning about education, agriculture, and all these sectors. How the central government, that's the author says, that how the central government has been encroaching on all these fields, how the central government has been given the direct benefit transfer in case of agricultural produce payments, and even central government has been coming up with various health schemes, which is centralized, which is centrally sponsored, and at the same time centrally centrally administered. So that also somehow reduces the state's partnership or state's participation into these areas which are exclusively for states. So through these examples, the author has been trying to point out how the strong government, just because there is a strong government in center, so they have been able to do all these kinds of infringement in the state's rights, right? State's exclusive rights. even when it comes to all these three sectors specifically has been mentioned, though the education, agriculture, and all. But see, earlier the author compares this with the previous governments in the previous years when the coalition government was there in India. So in those times, what used to happen, the participation of state parties, state regional parties, was there in central government. So that is the reason the kind of in every sector the kind of participation and cooperation was bigger due to the weak government in center. So if it with the strong government in the sector now with the current dispensation, what is happening, the author says that this has somehow reduced the state's participation even in the cultural aspect. That also has been discussed here, the cultural socio cultural foundation as well. Even in the cultural aspect as well, the state's participation, state's cooperation has been somehow reduced. So author even later on asserts, uh, I mean, even in our constitution, there is a tilt towards center. That's what the author mentions here. This erosion of federal relation is often encountered through the appeals to restore the constitutional powers of states. However, history tells us that such calls may not amount to much in absence of regional political assertion. Constitutional powers, including fiscal relations, are inherently biased as given in our constitution, inherently biased towards the center. Why? Because vesting all the residuary powers with the center and giving overruling powers to the center in case of concurrent list. So, with these two provisions in our constitution, there is a tilt towards center's power. So that cannot be countered even here. That's what the author says. So primary source of this bias, and what is seldom recognized is that the degree of federalism in India has dependent largely upon two variables. So author says here the degree of federalism, what degree, what frequency, how much the federalism, how much strong federalism will be in India's scenario, India's case, that depends on two variables. What are those two variables? The first is nature of political coalitions, means what type of government is there in the center. If it is a coalition government wherein the other state regional parties are participating, in that case the cooperation will be stronger, the federalism will be stronger. That's what it says. Coalition at the center and role of states in such coalitions, like the author gives example of 96 to 2014 for example, and cultural diversity of regions. Hence what is needed is the federal coalition that looks beyond the legal constitutional aspects of the federalism. So author here talks about a federalism which is not actually limited to the constitutional provisions, that goes beyond that constitutional provisions. So author here, actually both the authors, they come up with the conclusion that what they are aiming, what they want to say, they are expecting, they actually imagine a kind of federalism which goes beyond the legal constitutional aspects. As you know, it has been envisaged in our constitutional provisions. It goes beyond that, and even they are actually expecting, they're imagining stronger federalism. That kind of that kind of frequency, a degree of federalism is expected, but that is realized only when there is a weak government in center. That's what the authors actually finally conclude after many examples, and that too in the current scenario. So that's the reason I told you in the beginning that this article has little bit of political tilt. But yes, what is our concern? Our concern is federalism and the federal structure in India's context and as it is given in Indian constitution. That much is our concern, and that much you have to relate this with, with this concept, with the concept of federalism. So you just have to link this, relate this with the concept of federalism. Federalism as given in our constitution, as given in the constitution. That's where we have to relate. And at the same time, we also must read the author's views, author's perspective, what they want to say, right? As we have seen, finally, the final conclusion tells it all what the author actually wants to say finally. They are envisaging, actually, they are expecting a kind of stronger federalism, and they suggest that the degree of federalism depends on this factor, that what kind of coalition government is there in center. Just because the current dispensation is the strong government, so they are somehow centralizing even the business aspects of it, That's what the socio-capital relations they talk about here. Union encroachment they talk about here. They talk about all those businesses after giving the even the RCEP example, right? So they give the RCEP example, and then even they try to stab, establish that argument here. So on that basis, you can see that finally they concluded that just because the current dispensation, the current government is the stronger one, so there is less participation from the state regional parties. That is the reason they have tendency to centralize many aspects. And this is also supported. If you see, this cannot be countered with the constitutional measures. That's what they're citing here. That because even the residuary powers has been vested in the center, that is vested in union, and at the same time even the upper hand, the overruling power has been given to the center in case of concurrent list. So these are the provisions actually which goes in the favor of union, which goes in the favor of center. So on that basis you cannot counter, so there are only two aspects, two variables on what basis this could be countered, the better degree of federalism could be brought. What are the two aspects? Those two aspects are the nature of government and the state regional parties participation into it. That is what has been concluded. So this article was one article which was talking about the federalism in current scenario. The other article which we see now, just give me a sec. So the other article here, this next one, it talks about the vaccination gap on the global level. So as we know, the vaccination is, it's being discussed globally, that how the vaccine production could be enhanced, how the vaccine production could be increased, what should be done, how the patents could be, waived off, what kind of, we have seen an article few days back where the compulsory licensing was being discussed under, compulsory licensing was discussed actually, right? Compulsory licensing in case of patent waiver, and even the voluntary licensing was also discussed. Voluntary licensing, which is anyway favored by the Indian pharma manufacturers. So these two types of licensing was discussed in an article, just because of the ongoing discussion. What is the ongoing discussion? That all these, the drug producers, the vaccine producers, the vaccine where the research and everything happened. So all these institutions, they should waive their patent, or they must share the know-how voluntarily. There are two methods. So anyway, when it comes to production by the Indian pharma producers, they prefer voluntary licensing. Voluntary licensing, I have already discussed earlier that under the voluntary licensing, what happens? These institutions, these pharma companies, they share their know-how of the vaccine manufacturing with another manufacturers on some condition, on the basis of some conditions, because they know deep down well, they know very pretty well that they cannot sell, they cannot earn profit from the third world countries, from developing countries, and from underdeveloped countries. They cannot sell their inflated, priced vaccine to these countries. So that is the reason they come under one, compromise. They can't come under one, understanding with the pharma producers, with the manufacturers in other countries like India, that you can manufacture the vaccine, but that vaccine must be sold in those areas only, with those underdeveloped countries only. That should not come to other developed countries. So wherein they are going to do the business. So this is a kind of mechanism, middle path. Voluntary licensing is kind of middle path, right? Because these manufacturers, these vaccine manufacturers, or even these vaccine developers, they are selling their vaccine in the developed countries, and that is not being disturbed, but the other manufacturers in the developing countries are being allowed under the mechanism to manufacture the vaccine and sell in the underdeveloped and developing countries only, right? So that is a kind of voluntary licensing mechanism. Compulsory licensing mechanism under the TRIPS and Doha declaration, under this, any country can forcibly, they can give all the know-how to any manufacturer for manufacturing. That is under the, anyway, emergency condition, that could be done, even that also. So these two types of licensing was also discussed earlier. So here actually the author talks about licensing also here, issue of licensing, but at the same time, apart from licensing, author also discussed how not providing the vaccine to underdeveloped and developing countries, low income countries, is actually a vaccination apartheid as called by WHO, right? So doing so is both morally So providing vaccines to these all countries is morally right and everyone's interest. That is in everybody's interest, because uh, either everybody is vaccinated, otherwise it will not benefit anyone. So everybody is not safe until every individual is actually vaccinated on earth. That's the point here. So that is morally correct, and that is in everybody's interest, every country's interest, every citizen's interest. That's what has been said here. If it is not provided to every country, this will be called as vaccination apartheid. Therefore, we need to global multilateral actions. That's what the author talks about here. Even G20 leaders also at the Global Health Summit in Rome on May 21 asserted the same thing. It has been asserted by G20 leaders in this summit. And then after that, the author here talks about that the pandemic is still killing thousands of people, and the pandemic, otherwise, the multiplication of variants is likely to undermine the effectiveness of existing vaccines. So, what will happen if all these countries are not provided with vaccines? So, what will happen? Because this virus is mutilating at very fast speed, it's multiplying. The multiplication of variants, so this will undermine everybody's safety, right? So it's nobody's safe even after vaccinating, because the kind of multiplication, the kind of variants coming up every day, if half of the population will not be vaccinated, so this is not beneficial for anyone. That's also has been asserted by the author. And author also talks about here that vaccination is also prerequisite for lifting the restriction and economic conditions. The economic conditions, the kind of uh, economic condition which is prevalent, so even the economic loss is greater. So till the time everybody is vaccinated, you cannot even lift all kinds of restrictions, and you cannot work on the economic recovery. So the economic cost is so huge that if all the countries come and spend $50 billion, as EU welcomes the $50 billion plan proposed by the international IMF, जो IMF ने एक 50 billion dollar का plan propose किया, even EU European Union welcomes that program. Why? Because the cost of economic cost, if not vaccinated, the economic cost is huge. That is greater in comparison to this 50 billion program, right, proposed by the IMF. And in order to able to vaccinate 40% of the world's population in 2021 and 60% of world's population by 2022, so that we can vaccinate the whole world. So this program is supported by European Union, even if we compare with the economic cost, if not vaccinated, will be even bigger than this. So this is in everybody's favor. That's what the author talks about here. Now the EU's role, he talks about EU's exclusive role, what European Union is doing. So the author says we must come together and work towards the vaccination of the world, one thing, but that must not be used for political goals or the vaccine nationalism. That should not be worked in that sense. As it is the same is being done now, EU. The European Union is doing the same, vaccinating its own population at the same time. This is also helping the low income countries. European Union is doing, and the similar line India is also doing under the vaccine map 3. So these kind of programs are being uh, formulated by European Union and India under various names, right? Various programs, so, with the global solidarity. So in 2020, the European Union supported the research and development, and they also you know uh, around 40% of the doses they have been giving globally, right, under the WHO program. So they exported 240 million doses to 90 countries, which is about as much as used within the European Union. So this is equal amount. So equal amount of the doses the European Union has been using domestically, and 250 million around as like approximately equal number of doses has been spread in 90 countries now, supported or sent to the 90 countries. So Team Europe is also donating vaccines to neighbors in need. That also has been discussed here. And he's also talking about the COVAX facility. As we all know, COVAX facility, under this, every government or all the developed countries and everybody will be contributing. There will be contribution of around $2.8 billion. That's the estimation. And then the manufacturing will be done, and that will be exported to all the countries. Even India was part of it, because India is anyways manufacturing hub. So that was also part of this COVAX facility, which was discussed even in India. COVAX facility, right? So that under this program, the vaccine was sent to the first dose of vaccine was sent to African countries. They are still waiting for the second dose, though it did not reach them. So that's also has been mentioned here, that we must support that also. Now here they talk about the supporting Africa. So specifically African countries has been discussed here. So supply chain. We also need to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and technology. We must facilitate the transfer of knowledge and technology so that the manufacturing is done in India and other African countries as well, because 90%, more than 90% of the vaccines is being imported. 99% is being imported by the African countries, which is huge. If we can facilitate somehow by transferring the knowledge and technology to African countries and they can produce it in their own country, that will be good. That's what is being discussed here. So this is being even funded and backed by the European Union. This is being discussed here. So to boost the manufacturing of capacity in Africa of the vaccines. So issue of licensing has also been discussed here. As I told you, compulsory licensing and voluntary licensing. So voluntary licensing is privileged way to ensure such transfer of technology and know-how. That is better way if it comes to voluntary licensing. As I told you that the here the happily the the pharma companies or the manufacturer of the vaccines, they voluntarily, they happily, they share the know-how with other manufacturers in the developing countries so that they can manufacture the vaccine for underdeveloped and developing countries only, and it will be restricted from being exported to developed countries, wherein these pharma companies, these manufacturers can sell their product on profit, right? So these kind of mechanism is voluntary licensing. So that's what the author is saying, that under the voluntary licensing we can do it, or even under the TRIPS and Doha Declaration we have other mechanism of compulsory licensing that is also available to us. So under any of these we must work together and we must produce and manufacture the vaccines at a large scale and make this available to every country, because nobody is safe until everybody is safe. Simple, right? So the COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us that the health is a global public good. That has reminded us, as we can see now, the way the world is connected, and the way the virus is multiplying, the way the virus is mutilating. So nobody is safe anyway, right? And we have seen that it's a global public good. And our common global COVID-19 vaccine action to close the vaccination gap must be the first step towards the genuine global health cooperation, as foreseen by the Roman Declaration recently adopted in the Global Health Summit. So that's even the author has mentioned here. The Global Health Summit, which was held and the Roman Declaration was adopted. So the author talks about that also. So see this, the complete vaccination. This article is based on the complete vaccination and COVAX facility and other other facilities, Vaccine Math 3 by India, and all those programs, which is being formulated, and even the patent discussion, which is being discussed for long, that there has to be patent waiver either in the form of voluntary licensing or in the form of compulsory licensing, and this must be speeded up so that every country, and even the underdeveloped countries and developing countries are also vaccinated ASAP, as soon as possible. So this article discusses that. Now, embracing children, speedy implementation of the relief schemes for the children orphaned by COVID-19 is essential. We know that, so that article is not much important because we are already aware. So these were the two articles. Exam fear, the CBSE exam class 12th exam has been cancelled by the center, but the center must act to secure the education. This is again suggestive article which talks about what should be done to at least secure the education now after the exam has been cancelled. So these were the two articles which was important. Let me see the other article now. So the other article here at this page, what we see, the far-reaching tax measures. There has been discussion by the US. US is pushing this discussion of global minimum corporate tax. Global minimum corporate tax. So this global minimum corporate tax, why this has been necessitated? This has been necessitated because of base erosion of profit shifting. BEPS. BEPS. That is base erosion of profit shifting. What is this? As we all have heard about the tax havens, tax haven countries, right? Where the big corporate houses, they go to save the taxes. Big corporate houses and business houses, they shift to these tax haven countries where the taxation is low taxation, tax havens. So where the taxation is low, so these corporate houses and business houses, they shift their manufacturing unit and their other physical presence to these countries in order to save the taxation, in order to avoid the higher tax in other countries, right? So with this, even India is suffering, because in India also Mauritius route and Singapore route, we all know how they know the investment comes. How even various startups and other companies also they shift to Mauritius, even the Singapore and other low tax countries. So this is actually affecting United States. This is affecting America heavily in many sectors. So there are many sectors where America is affected with this due to this mechanism. So now what America seeks now, America is seeking to somehow rectify this kind of taxation or revenue loss where the taxation loss is happening, right? Because due to higher tax, many other manufacturers, many companies, many corporate houses, they shift to other locations where they which are considered low tax countries or tax havens, right? So due to this, there are pillar 1 and pillar 2, two types of taxation is being discussed by OECD countries, and now the US also wants this to be speeded up. Just US wants this to be finalized ASAP. So under this, what United States want, they want 21%. They are proposing 21% minimum taxation. So, but that's after discussion that has been reduced to 15%. Earlier it was proposed 21%. So now this is being in a reduced sense. This is being discussed at 15%, right? So see, but still there is a lot of opposition from Ireland and other European countries. So there are many European countries which are in favor, like Germany and France, but some countries are are against this policy, right? But India is a kind of a fence sitter. India is taking the middle path, Buddha's middle path. India is not very much in hurry because it goes in India's favor anyway. Because even Indian countries shift their basis just to avoid tax. So it somehow benefits India too, though India is not very much actively persuading this. But other countries are actually opposing this policy even at the 15% rate, which is minimum rate has been. So other factors, other major factors, tax intensive neutralized countries may have to compete on other factors like the better regulatory regimes and ease of doing business, access to global talent, and among others. So, if this minimum taxation is actually implemented, global minimum corporate taxation, if it is implemented, then the corporate houses and business houses will not have other, will look must look for other incentives. What are the other incentives? These are the other incentives. So the tax benefit. So the tax benefit can not be the only reason for shifting, right? Because taxation will be almost equal then in that case. That could be backtracked. They might be the taxed again by 15%. So now this 15% norm is actually being opposed by some countries. OECD is actually swiftly following it. It has been following. It's 37 countries are in OECD. We all know that it's an organization of economic cooperation and development. OECD countries, developed countries, mostly developed countries are there in this group. So all those countries are persuading, although all those countries are in favor of this mechanism, but there are some countries in European Union who are against. So let's see how this negotiation works if US is able to speed up this process. But India is like, as I told you, that India is not very enthusiastic on this, though it goes in India's favor. So India is taking the middle path. It's not in hurry, right? That is about this article about the taxation, global corporate taxation, minimum global corporate taxation. And the other article talks about mental health. As you see, after this, mental health has been in discussion uh, uh, since some time. So now, see, this article talks about mental health. You can read that, and that is all, right? These are the important articles. That's all for today. Have fun. See you in the